Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session on Foundations of Internal Auditing. Today, we are going to explore the essential principles and practices that define internal audit profession. This foundation is critical not only for those working directly in audit roles, but also for anyone interacting with audit teams or working in governance, risk, or compliance. Let me begin with outlining what we will cover today. We will start with understanding the mission of internal audit as defined by the Institute of Internal Auditors or IIA. Then we will move into the definition of internal audit and the core principles that guide professional auditing. We will look at the purpose, authority, and responsibility of internal audit within an organization. We will understand the importance of an internal audit charter. Finally, we will examine the key differences between assurance and consulting services provided by internal auditor. End of this session, you should have a solid grasp of the role internal audit plays in supporting an organization's governance and control environment. The International Professional Practices Framework, or IPPF, is the globally recognized framework for internal auditing. The IIA's mission for internal auditing is to enhance and protect organizational values by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. I will be using the term risk-based and objective assurance throughout this session. With risk-based, it implies that auditor needs to judgmentally select high-risk areas to focus on. And with objective assurance, it means that an auditor needs to be unbiased and truthful while providing the assurance services. The IIPF supports this mission through mandatory guidance that includes core principles, definition, standards, and code of ethics. And then they have recommended guidance that include implementation guidance and supplemental guidance. Think of IAPBF as the blueprint for consistent, high-quality audit practices across different industries and geographies. Now let's talk about the core principle for professional practice of internal auditing. These principles are what make internal audit effective. There are 10 core principles that include demonstrate integrity, which means honesty and truthfulness. Second, demonstrate competence and due professional care, which implies that internal auditors should be competent to perform the audit activity and should use the professional care while performing the assessment. Is objective and free from undue influence. In simple terms, an internal auditor should be unbiased and should not be impacted by influence from anyone within the organization. Internal auditors should be independent while performing audit activity. Aligns with strategies, objective, and risk of the organization. It's really important that internal auditor should align with the strategies and objectives of the organization so that they could add value in achieving those objectives to the organization. Is appropriately positioned and adequately resourced. Internal audit function should be independent, should have direct line of reporting to board, and should be adequately resourced so that they could perform their duties efficiently. Quality and continuous improvement. Internal audit function should have quality resources to conduct audit activities and should continuously making efforts to improve the deliverables. Communicates effectively. Effective communication in internal audit is essential to translate complex risk into clear, actionable insights for the stakeholders. It builds trust, drives accountability, and ensures audit findings lead to meaningful improvements. Next is provides risk-based assurance. As I mentioned before, internal auditor is supposed to provide risk-based assurance. They need to use the judgment and perform analysis based on data to identify the high-risk areas and should focus on those. Is insightful, proactive, and future-focused. Internal auditors should be focusing on the future objective of the organization. The last core principle is to promote organizational improvement. This can be achieved by providing objective evaluation that help enhance efficiency, effectiveness, and risk management. Through independent insights and actionable recommendations, internal audit supports continuous improvement across all levels of the organization. Moving next, this is this definition of internal auditing. It is a concise statement of the role of the internal audit activity in the organization. Internal auditing is defined as an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity that is designed to add value and improve an organization's operation. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance processes. In simple terms, internal audit. The next element of mandatory guidance is code of ethics. The code of ethics states the principles and expectations governing the behavior of individuals and organizations in the conduct of internal auditing. These describes the minimum requirements for conduct and behavioral expectation. The purpose of Institute's Code of Ethics is to promote an ethical culture in the profession of internal auditing. A code of ethics is necessary and appropriate for the profession of internal auditing, which is founded on trust placed in its objective assurance about governance, risk management, and control. The Institute's Code of Ethics extend beyond the definition of internal auditing to include two essential components. One, principles that are relevant to the profession and practice of internal auditing, rules of conduct that describe behavior norms expected of internal auditor. These rules are an aid to interpreting the principles into practical applications and are intended to guide the ethical conduct of internal auditor. Next slide talks about the standards that serve the following purposes. They act as a guide for implementing the IAPF elements. They provide the framework for promoting a broad range of value-added internal auditing services. They establish the basis for evaluation of the internal auditor's performance, and they foster the improved organization processes and operations. There are different standards describe the characteristics of the organization and parties providing internal auditing services. They govern the responsibilities, attitudes, and action of the organization's internal audit activity and the people who serve as internal auditor. Whereas performance standards describe and govern the nature of internal auditing and provide quality criteria for evaluation of internal audit performance. Interpretation of attribute or performance standards are provided by the IIA to clarify terms and concepts. Implementation standards apply to specific types of engagement. They expand beyond individual attribute or performance standards by providing requirements applicable to assurance or consulting services. Moving to the next slide, let's now look at the purpose, authority, and responsibility of internal audit. The purpose is to provide independent assurance that an organization risk management, governance, and internal control processes are operating effectively. The authority of internal audit activity is established by the audit charter, which gives the internal auditor access to all records, personnel, and physical properties relevant to performing audits. The responsibility includes evaluating and improving the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance processes. In essence, internal audit act as the organization trusted advisor, independent but internal, serving the organization needs. The Internal Audit Charter is a formal document that defines the internal audit activity's purpose, authority, and responsibility. It establishes the internal audit function's position within the organization authorize access to records and personnel. A well-crafted charter ensures alignment between internal audit function and organization strategic objectives and reinforce the auditor's independence and objectivity. It is typically approved by a board or audit committee, which underscores its importance. Moving back to the slide, let's understand difference between assurance and consulting services provided by internal audit. Assurance services involve the auditor's objective assessment of evidence to provide opinion or conclusion regarding an entity, operation, function, or process. Examples include audit of internal control, risk management processes, or compliance with laws and policies. Consulting services, on the other hand, are advisory in nature and are generally performed at the request of the organization. Examples include training, process improvement initiatives, or control design assistance. It is important to note that while consulting services can be valuable, they must not impair the auditor's objectivity or independence. This concludes the core content of our session on the foundation of internal auditing. We have covered the mission, the definition of internal audit, the framework and the core principles that guide it, and the key responsibilities and service roles it fulfills. Thank you